Did you know that since 2001, over 31,000 of our soldiers have been discharged from the military with personality disorder? And that discharging our soldiers that way has saved the military over $17.2 billion in disability benefits and long-term medical care. Well, I didn't know that. I had no idea what personality disorder was until I started volunteering for a veterans group in my neighborhood in New York City. My role at the veterans organization was to tell the stories of soldiers. Soldiers returning from Iraq and Afghanistan with stories of heroism and courage, tragedy and triumph. Specialist Jonathan Town was going to be the fifth soldier in this series of soldier stories until he told me something that knocked me flat. He described how he was wounded by a rocket blast in Iraq, won the Purple Heart for his wounds, and so they discharged him with a personality disorder. I said, wait, what? A personality? That didn't make any sense to me. I was baffled. And so I began to dig. And that is how I fell down the rabbit hole of this story, investigating these personality disorder discharges for the last 9 years. First, we put it on the cover of The Nation magazine. And then Bob Woodruff and I put it on Nightline.
In Iraq in the fall of 2004, a rocket exploded 2 feet above Town's head, knocking him out for several minutes.
When I started coming to, I could feel my buddy shaking me and saying, Town, are you awake? Town, are you okay?
The blast left him with significant hearing loss, along with headaches and memory problems. After the attack, Town was awarded a Purple Heart. But when he returned to the States, depressed and tormented by nightmares, the Army acted quickly to discharge him, ruling his problems were caused not by the war, but by a personality disorder that predated his military career.
They basically said that you had a mental problem before he got into the Army.
Correct.
Based on what?
Nothing.
Did they ever question your parents, your friends, anybody from your past?
Not at all.
The military calls it separation because of personality disorder, defined in regulations as a deeply ingrained maladaptive pattern of behavior. And because it is considered a pre-existing condition, Town was left ineligible for disability pay and benefits, and he was forced to return a portion of his re-enlistment bonus.
The day I got discharged, they told me I owed the Army $3,000.
That you owe them money?
Correct.
You got a Purple Heart, got sent back, left the Army, now you owe them money?
Correct.
Town's voice broke the silence. And soon after he spoke out, Law and Order stepped forward and made personality disorder discharges a feature in its subsequent season. And then the big guns stepped in. Senator Barack Obama and rock star Dave Matthews. Obama put forward a bill, S-1817, to halt all personality disorder discharges. Matthews put a petition on his rock band's website asking Congress to investigate these discharges. Within a few days, that petition had over 23,000 signatures. Next thing you know, there I was, sitting before Congress, and there was Specialist Jonathan Town. After Town told his story to Congress, I heard from voices in the military from all across the country. I spoke with military doctors who talked to me about the pressure on them to purposely misdiagnose wounded soldiers. One told me the story of a soldier that came back with a chunk missing from his leg. His superiors pressured him to diagnose that as personality disorder. I also got a flood of letters just like this one. Personality disorder discharge, please help, exclamation point. That letter came from Sergeant Chuck Luther, who served in Iraq and was knocked to the ground by a mortar blast, slammed his head against the concrete, ended up with headaches so severe that they would blot out his vision, literally blinding headaches. When his superiors tried to tell him that his blindness was caused by pre-existing personality disorder. He refused to sign the documents. And so they put him in a storage closet and held him there for over a month under enforced sleep deprivation, with armed guards keeping the lights on all night, blasting heavy metal music at him. He tried to escape the closet. They pinned him down, injected him with sleeping medication, and dragged him back until finally, exhausted, defeated, he signed the documents. Now, it's worth mentioning that personality disorder actually is a recognized mental illness. You might recognize these faces here. In the upper left-hand corner, that's Adam Lanza, the young man who went into Sandy Hook Elementary School and murdered all those children. In the lower right-hand corner, those are the Columbine killers. Each of them recognized cases of personality disorder. It's such a severe mental illness that the military screens every soldier for it before they're admitted into the military. They're screened a second time before being deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. In the 9 years that I reported on this story, the dozens and dozens of soldiers I interviewed, all of them were a lot more like Sergeant Chuck Luther, who served a dozen years, won 22 honors for his performance before his pre-existing condition was discovered. They were service members like Airman Amy Quinn. Quinn, a Navy electrician, served on the USS Harry Truman, where she was brutally raped and physically assaulted. When she reported the crimes to her superiors, did they arrest her attackers? Did they confine them to a corner of the ship? No. Instead, they settled on a discharge for her, for personality disorder. It's important to understand that the military doesn't deny any aspect of this scandal. In fact, I spoke with Sergeant Luther's commanders who talked to me about his discharge and described why they felt confining him to the closet was the right thing to do. What the military has said is that these discharges aren't acts of injustice, because the soldiers, they can appeal their cases, win in front of an appeals board, and then after the appeals board overturns their personality disorder discharge, can get disability benefits and long-term medical care. But how often does that happen? An enterprising reporter at Fusion Television, Alyssa Figueroa, spent a year trying to find out. In her series, A Losing Battle, she looked at the last 3,000 cases of personality disorder discharge appeals. And of those 3,000 appeals, the number of cases that the appeals board overturned in the soldier's favor, 0. And the reason was quite simple. As she found, the appeals board was setting aside an average time of 3 minutes and 45 seconds to consider each appeal. Now, we can speculate as to what an entire appeals board can achieve in just 3 minutes and 45 seconds, but I think this graphic says it better than I can. These are two hands sorting through the hundreds and hundreds of pages of medical documents that Sergeant Luther put together to prove that he was wounded in war in just 3 minutes and 45 seconds. You simply can't do it. All you can do is blindly assume that the military got it right the first time and move on from there. Of course, Airman Amy Quinn didn't need an enterprising television reporter to tell her that every appeal gets rejected. All she needed to do was go to her mailbox, where the appeals board had her rejection waiting right there for her. By the time the New York Times caught on to this story and put it on its front page, the number of discharges was sky high. Since 2001, over 31,000 soldiers had been discharged from the military with personality disorder. at a savings to the military of over $17.2 billion in disability benefits and long-term medical care. Now, that New York Times piece, that was 2012. You might be asking, well, where are we now? Well, the honest answer is we actually have no idea. The Government Accountability Office did a report on personality disorder discharges just last year, and they found that they can't even track them anymore. And that's because each of the branches of the military are finding all new ways to funnel wounded soldiers out the side door. Some are still calling it personality disorder. Others are calling it adjustment disorder. Others are finding new methods altogether. Same lack of benefits, same lack of medical care, only now undetectable, beneath the radar. So, what can be done? Yale Law School had an enterprising solution. They put together the Veterans Legal Services Clinic specifically to address this issue of personality disorder discharges. Sergeant Luther had an extraordinary project. He founded Disposable Warriors, a veterans group designed to assist wounded soldiers who've been discharged with personality disorder. And Representative Timothy Walz, the highest ranking enlisted man in the US Congress, he stepped back on the floor of Congress and resubmitted Senator Obama's bill to halt these discharges once and for all. But the real solution, I think, is actually a lot simpler. It begins with you, and it begins with me. We can know what is happening to our soldiers. For those of you here tonight, the phrase personality disorder will never again be a mystery. Maybe you've even become curious enough to go home tonight, Google personality disorder discharges, and find out what the heck is happening to our soldiers. We can share. For those here tonight, when you're having dinner with your family, will you tell them what's happening to our wounded soldiers? For those of you who are hearing my voice at home, with Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at your fingertips, will you make one click and share our soldiers' stories with your friends and family? Will you challenge them to share this video with their friends and their family? Because finally, we can recognize that this is not a political issue. This is a human rights crisis. Because these soldiers, they're not just statistics and they're not just photos. Airman Amy Quinn, Sergeant Chuck Luther, Specialist Jonathan Town. These are real people. These are real families. They've served us. Now it's our turn to serve them. Thank you.